Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. I wanted to just do three things in this session. One is just tell you a little bit about ETI, what we do, and who we are for those of you who don't know. Secondly, to tell you a little bit about our approach in relation to what to do about modern slavery on due diligence, human rights due diligence, and how we think about those issues in relation to workers. And thirdly, to give you an example of how we work and how we have worked within this sector to address those issues in complex supply chains. So I will hope to stick to time. Well, I will stick to time. Firstly, to say that ETI is a multi-stakeholder initiative. We were set up 18 years ago, comprising companies, around 90 brands and retailers, around 16 non-governmental civil society organizations, and global trade union and national trade union federations. The idea behind ETI was that beyond the campaigns and the naming and shaming moments that are sometimes very definitely needed to get the attention of the public, of investors and senior leaders, beyond that moment, then what happens, and how do we ensure that the rights of workers and their working conditions are respected and progressively advanced. It's no good when a company that is named and shamed in the media simply pulls out of their supplier relationship. Those workers left in that supply chain are left without a job, often much more vulnerable to serious exploitation and abuse, and you simply displace the problem, as others have said before. And so ETI's approach is a collaborative one. Our company members sign up to something called the Base Code, which is based on ILO conventions. We don't expect them to tick the box and say no child labor, no forced labor, but what we do expect them to do in relation to these labor standards is demonstrate a commitment to addressing these issues and to progressively improve their actions and performance to address those issues as and when they exist and as and where they are found. And what we do is engage with companies in a number of ways, as well as with the trade unions and NGOs. So we convene safe spaces for companies to sit together and talk about problems and talk about the challenges that competitors face in a pre-competitive environment, in a safe space, to talk about some labor rights violations. And then to do that in partnership and in conversation with sometimes quite challenging conversations with the trade unions and the NGOs that might be wanting to campaign against them. So to address these issues in a way that says, okay, let's get real, let's talk about the issues and how we're going to address them. And that collaborative action leads to progressive improvement. And I'll give you that example later on. We try and demonstrate that in the number of supply chains in relation to some commodity areas and sectors. Again, I'll talk that through. We do training and capacity building very much as a hands-on learning experience, not simply telling people what you should know and leaving you to manage the rest, but try and think about how you do that work with peers to think through some of the issues you need to tackle. We're trying as well to change the conversation from the north, from the big brands and retailers and companies, to a conversation that is owned and generated in the south, in countries where products and services and support is being sourced. How do we bring in those stakeholders and engage them in a process where they feel that there is a greater partnership between suppliers and workers and brands and retailers, where the risk is not simply passed down the chain in a compliance-driven sort of big brother kind of way. And so we're increasingly keen to engage with local stakeholders to correct that balance. And we're learning interesting things. Suppliers tell us stuff about how companies are, as much as they might be committed to ethical trade practices, when a retailer or a brand is making deals with these companies on terms that are simply not sustainable for them to be paying decent wages and respecting working hours, we are able to bring that into the conversation. Research guidance, I think one of our reports that we have available is a recent report that we've done with Health Business School, which is trying to look at what corporate leadership on modern slavery looks like. There are some really interesting findings 1 year on from the Modern Slavery Act. And I have some copies, and I think some of the statistics are quite interesting about what role UK, not only UK companies, but others are seeing the Act as playing in getting senior buy-in and engagement. And we do policy influencing and advocacy. So engaging with the government, as has been said in relation to the Modern Slavery Act, Transparency in Supply Chains Clause, but also in places like Cambodia and Myanmar, where garment workers have been excluded from living wage provisions or minimum wage provisions, where our member companies have partnered with some others to put pressure on the government and local industry to say, actually, our investment here in your sector is at risk if the government does not fulfill its obligation to be paying minimum wages in this area. So that our companies see as a really important role for them, but often want to do that collectively rather than individually as big brands. I've mentioned the report and I'm not going to dwell on it, but I have copies and my colleague Hannah Bruce is here as well, and we can give you some of those. Really interesting findings. What we were trying to do is demonstrate what does good look like. It's not to say that companies are doing it, but at least can they recognize it? And how do they drive a better conversation through what they know is good practice? The Rajasthan Sandstone project is one example that I want to point to because it gives an example of how we've worked. So Marshalls has been name dropped, but Marshalls is one of ETI's longest standing member companies. But we have a number of other stone suppliers in the ETI membership. And some years ago, it was very clearly understood that there were risks of child labor, of asbestosis, of silicosis, of appalling, not just health and safety violations, but indeed working hours, very poor wages, if wages at all, bonded labor situations, and so on. And so within that space, our members got together and started working right down the supply chain with the local stone quarry owners, with the stone processing plants, and started engaging with local government to say, actually, there's a problem here. And it's really difficult for us to be selling our products to our customers when we know that these issues are going on in our supply chain. And so what we've worked to do progressively is address some of those issues. And change mindsets, change culture in the process. And just finally, human rights due diligence. ETI has, you know, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights has been referred to, and there is good guidance out there. What we tried to do is bring our trade unions, company, and NGO members together to say, what do we think good due diligence framework looks like? Again, I've got, you know, on our website, there's the full report, but if you want some exec summaries, we've got them and it's free and available. But we do see due diligence, human rights due diligence and tackling modern slavery as a process of continuous improvement, not just to identify risks, but indeed for companies to identify where do they have leverage, where is their responsibility greatest as a kind of salient risk. Sometimes you can't be figuring out whether the screws in your building operations, what the level of responsibility are. So it's really about identifying where the risks are greatest and where your responsibility is greatest to figure out what you do about it. And to remediate workers, very much we would argue through workers' organization, through trade unions, and to effectively review and evaluate progress and change on a gradual basis. My time is up. I will stop, but you can ask me questions later on. Thank you.